It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. I'm Brian Cat NFL on Twitter, and Paul is fanatic_pick. So finally we're here. The off-season is with us now. We can start taking a look at free agency and the NFL draft finally after a pretty grueling season here with a very surprising result beating the Patriots in the final week. But what Paul and I are going to do is take a look at 10 free agents that could be good fits for the Miami Dolphins as free agency approaches here in March. A lot of things are going to happen till then, and then we're going to have the draft after that. We'll have coverage on both as the offseason progresses. But, Paul, before we get into that, there were, even though we haven't compared lists and we're in the dark on who our top 10 is, the two things that I know we're in agreement on here is, number one, we don't have any quarterbacks on this list because we feel Ryan Fitzpatrick will be that veteran, or he's going to retire and the Dolphins are going to completely rely on the draft. We expect him to be back here in 2020. And number two, we don't have anybody on this list over 30 years old. We tried to stay away from them as well because this is, let's face it, a rebuilding team that's going to see the fruits of its labor, not necessarily in 2020, but over a period of the next 3 years. So at quarterback, you do have a lot of guys hitting the market here. I mean, you've got, believe it or not, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Ryan Tannehill, Phillip Rivers, Teddy Bridgewater. A lot of these quarterbacks, and also Derek Carr and Matt Stafford may be available by trade to this offseason. So are you still there as far as the quarterback is concerned, where you've got Ryan Fitzpatrick being the veteran or nobody?
As far as my top 10, yes. That's what I'll say on that right now. It's, I don't want most of those guys to come in. I don't feel that they'd be a significant upgrade or responsible cap spending to get a minimal bit of placeholder out of at this point in time.
Yeah, I think if you get one of them, I think the only two that would even, I could say with a straight face, would be a significant upgrade would be Tom Brady or Drew Brees. And a lot of people would disagree with me on Brady. And I don't even know if it would be significant. And Brady's been the villain for the last 18 years or so. Drew Brees is somebody the Dolphins should have gotten 15 years ago, didn't. And it would be so Dolphins if you signed Drew Brees finally, and Drew Brees can't play at 40 years old anymore. Anyway, I think Brady and Brees would retire before going to another team anyway. And obviously you're not going to bring back Ryan Tannehill. And as far as the veterans are concerned, I don't see them turning around and spending $20 million on Phillip Rivers or Teddy Bridgewater when I don't even know for sure if they're an upgrade over Fitzpatrick. So we can take quarterback out of the equation for now. Paul, let's start at the bottom of your list here. Who is the 10th guy on your list?
Well, the 10th guy on my list is a guy that Brian Flores has a lot of familiarity with from up in New England. It's at an area of need for me. A lot of this board that I have, shocker alert, is going to be related to the areas of need along the offensive line, along the pass rush on the defensive side of the ball, with a few other things peppered in. And at number 10, I've got Kyle Van Noy from the Patriots. He's 6'3", 250. He can play the run. He had 6.5 sacks this season for that Pats defense. And Brian Flores knows his strengths and weaknesses well and knows how to deploy him. In defensive end, I think we can all agree has been a huge area of need for these Dolphins, as well as even the outside linebacker pass rush. And Kyle Van Noy can really do some good things for this defense down the stretch next year.
Yeah, a lot of familiarity there. I mean, he's 28 going on 29, but he's also not somebody who relies completely on speed either. So he could have I could see him coming here 3 or 4 years and having certainly an impact, especially with his familiarity in the defense. 10 on my list is offensive tackle, and I emphasize offensive tackle, Andres Pete, because he is a guard and he's played guard for the New Orleans Saints since he was drafted in 2015. Funny story, I was actually at the 2015 draft, and Andres Pete's grandmother was in the elevator with me going up, and she was sad because all the Saints fans hated that they drafted an offensive lineman. But now, there's a lot of differing opinions on this guy, and Saints fans can't stand him. Maybe it's because he was drafted, but also, too, he hasn't graded out very well by PFF. He gets pushed around a lot because he's built so tall. But at Stanford, he became the 13th overall pick in the 2015 draft by playing specifically at left tackle. And you're not going to see many left tackles, if any, out there on the free agent market. So I think that if you sign Andres Pete, you may be able to start him at left tackle for a much cheaper price than you would have gotten 5 years ago when he came out of Stanford. And in a worst-case scenario, he can kick back inside the guard. The Dolphins are going to have needs at both positions. Paul, back to you for number 9.
Well, since I outlined all of this about the offensive line, about pass rush, I did neglect one area that's truly a need for the Dolphins, and that's the running back position. And it seems hilarious to me because if you go back to our draft coverage from a few years back, I was 100% against this guy as a player, as a fit for the Dolphins. I thought he was going to wash out. I'll take that one right on the chin. But Derrick Henry, you look at the very special way that he has played this season, and I know you've alluded to the fact that Tannehill's elevated his game based on the play of Derrick Henry. But I'd also argue, looking at his stat line, Derrick Henry's play improved a little bit once Tannehill took off. And so I think they both fed off of each other. But you get Derrick Henry in here, you've already got a receiving threat at running back in Patrick Laird, and Derrick Henry is very much not a receiving threat. But the guy's been a monster. He's gone for 100-plus in 5 of his last 6 games. He did miss a game, so it's over a 7-game stretch. 3 of those games he went over 150. He's had 10 touchdowns in his last 6 games. He's gone over 200 yards one game. He's averaging 20 attempts per game for the season, 1,500-plus yards, 16 touchdowns, and averaging 5.1 yards per carry. I'm going to sign up for that all day. And the fact that we're running this spread offense now, or probably running the spread offense, let's face it. I mean, Shangaley runs it. We know we're going to, but let's say probably because stranger things have happened. Now you'd have Derrick Henry in the backfield with a spread out defense to deal with. And it would just elevate the play of the receivers, and it would give Derrick Henry a great chance coming out of that backfield. And it really could be a great matchup for this team.
I have at number 9 also Derrick Henry, and I'm surprised. I thought you may have had him a little bit higher on your list because of how dominant he played here at the end of the year. I mean, you gave a lot of great stats. I had a few of my own here, and this is the great thing about us having separate lists that we can compare, is over the last 7 games, my calculations were 171 carries for over 1,100 yards on 13 touchdowns. Over the last 7 games of the season, 6.47 yards a carry for a playoff team, and he is every bit the reason they're in the playoffs. I would put him in the top 5 of MVPs this year. Now, even though I expect the Titans to probably re-sign him, I think that could be the case with a few players on this list. He's played at a dominant level here this year, and my only concern with him is in 2 years, if he carries the ball 300-plus times again per year, is this guy going to be cooked after a couple of years here? So you've got that, but what I like on this too is that when you look at Henry, if they were to sign him, they could legitimately go into the offseason at running back, wide receiver, and tight end with all this money and all these draft picks and not even have to spend anything on them if they add a big 1,500-yard running back like Derrick Henry.
I'm with you on that. And that's one of the themes of my list here is really setting themselves up to go into the draft to have damn near no needs per se, and be able to go BPA as they move up and down the board, which we know they're going to do. It's been a staple of Chris Greer's. He's a big fan of making moves and trying to accumulate and go after his guys, et cetera. And Derrick Henry, the reason I think he could shake free, believe it or not, is Ryan Tannehill. I know Tannehill has played well because he's had that compliment in Derrick Henry, but he also has elevated his level of play. And the Titans are a team that knows how hard it is to find a reliable franchise quarterback. He's going into free agency at the same time as Derrick Henry. And because of the fact that Tannehill's entering free agency, as great as Derrick Henry has been, and you've said it yourself, you can find a running back. It may not be Derrick Henry, but you can find a running back. You cannot find your quarterback that easily. And every indication is the Titans have found the guy that they want at quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. They're not positioned to go after one of these top guys in the draft. Their path of least resistance, if they can't come to a long-term deal with Tannehill, believe it or not, may be to franchise the guy, which may allow Derrick Henry to test the market.
Yeah.
And it's literally just a positional value as far as quarterback or running back goes that Derrick Henry may be out there available.
That's quite possible. And, yeah, if I'm the Titans, I would absolutely try to re-sign Ryan Tannehill for as long as you can right now. And for our listeners, please understand this too. Just because Tannehill is playing well in Tennessee doesn't mean he would have played well here in Miami. I've said time and time again, it would have been foolish for Steve Ross to base the coaching search based on which fourth coach was going to give Ryan Tannehill an eighth season with the organization. But good for him that he's gotten healthy and had a hell of a year. Derrick Henry's been a big part of that. And you're right, if you re-sign Tannehill, it's probably going to be $25-30 million a year. And that's going to limit what you can do with Derrick Henry because I think he's going to get somewhere around $10 million a year too. Paul, I'm going to kick it back to you for number 8.
This was an easy one for me. We talk about the offensive line needing to be upgraded. Joe Tunney of the Patriots, he's one of the premier guards in football. I know we've talked about the writing being on the wall up there in New England. Tom Brady may be out the door. Bill Belichick is not getting any younger. I would not be shocked if Joe Tunney tests the market, and I think he would easily be an upgrade. And I'm going to go with at the right guard position, definitely not the left guard position, for this offense that struggled on the interior so dramatically over the past. God, I can't even remember the last time it was really reliable in the middle of the offensive line.
So, Paul, I'm going to follow up with you on that. So Joe Tunney's only played left guard for the Patriots, and I believe he only played left guard at NC State too. Why would you be against him playing left guard again?
I'll get to that. Don't you worry.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I think I blew it right there, but
yeah, you did. Don't you blow up my spot. We're only at number 8. I got more linemen on my list. I got more fat guys than you know what to do with here.
That makes more sense then. My number 8 guy is going to be Eric Armstead for the 49ers. Armstead in 2015 was a first-round pick, very tall, very skinny guy, and was only 20 years old. So it was a bigger project than I think the 49ers knew at the time. But finally here this past year, he started to put it all together. Double-digit sacks. He's 6'6", 300. And he's somebody, too, that when you look at the Dolphins and their need to get pressure on the quarterback, it may not fit in this defense to get a Cameron Wake or a Robert Quinn type of player. That's why they got rid of them here in the first place. But Eric Armstead can combine with Christian Wilkins and with Davin Gotcha on that defensive line, give you a lot of snaps, and fix a major hole in 2 different areas. One is a pass rusher, and number 2 as your third guy down on the line. So he's somebody that should get paid very handsomely here this offseason. Paul, you're number 7.
My number 7 here is a guy that I had a little bit higher last time we did this, but I'm going to flip to the other side of the ball from where I've been the last 2 picks. And we outlined the need for the outside linebacker, DE hybrid, being able to rush the passer. One of the great young guys that's out there on the market this year, or should be on the market this year, is Yannick of the Jaguars. I mean, he's not a big guy, 6'2", 246. He can put his hand in the dirt. He can rush the passer. He can drop back to outside linebacker a little bit and rush from there, or probably play some zone coverage a little more than man. But he had 8 sacks on the season for a team that most of the time teams were running the ball against because they didn't have a lead as often as they should have down the stretch. And really, he still had 6 pass defense. He had an interception, and he added 41 tackles to the mix. He's a guy that I think Flores could elevate the play from and get his best football out of, as opposed to what he's doing in Jacksonville, which was an underachieving team on the whole this season.
Very popular name, and this past offseason he was a holdout. Very few players are holdouts at 23 years old over contract. So, no, actually he's 24 this past offseason, but just turned 24. But either way, my number 7 on my list is going to be Brandon Scherff for the Redskins, and I'd imagine he's a little bit higher on your list than he is for me. I think Scherff is a fantastic player, and I think that the odds are very high he won't be back with the Redskins because they've got a lot of dead money tied up to other players, and Scherff, they offered already reportedly $13 million a year, and he turned it down. So he's going to get paid very handsomely. So he may be the best plug and play type on this list because he at right guard, you can put him in at right guard. You could possibly move Jesse Davis to another position. But the reason I've got him a little bit lower than 2 other offensive linemen on this list is he's going to be 29 just a few months into his first year with the Miami Dolphins if they were to sign him. He's already having injury problems. I mean, he hasn't had 1,000 snaps in a season since 2016, and you see a lot of other players on this list. They do have that durability, and they have played 1,000 snaps every year. He's missed 15 of his last 42 games. So it's not a slam dunk, but if you're telling me Brandon Scherff is going to play at the same level and he's going to be healthy for the next 3 years, he probably would be number 1 or number 2 on this list for me. So, Paul, who's number 6 for you?
Number 6 for me, and I wanted to have him higher. I had him higher last time around, but really we need a little more stability and reliability in this secondary, and he did have a bit of a down year this year. But again, he played for an absolute dumpster fire in the Dallas Cowboys. Byron Jones, who can play safety, he can play corner, he can be a flexible piece in that secondary, so he doesn't limit what you do in this draft. I think he could come in here. He can play the run. He's one phenomenal athlete, and he's 1 year removed from a spectacular season. And I would love to see him come in. He's not going to cost you as much as he would have if he'd been a free agent after last year. And he's an immediate upgrade over a lot of what we have in the secondary. So I'd love to see Byron, the ex-UConn player, end up in Miami.
Shockingly, we've got our second one where we've got him in the exact same free agency spot. I've got Byron Jones there at number 6 as well. And you hit on a lot of great points there. And yeah, he didn't have quite the year he had when he was an All-Pro here a couple of years ago, but still a pretty solid year there at cornerback. And it's more of a compliment sometimes when a guy doesn't have 4 or 5 interceptions a year because a lot of times they're being avoided. But him opposite Xavier Howard, provided Howard's situation, quote unquote, doesn't turn from bad to worse, then I think you've got 2 really good cornerbacks at 27 years old that can grow together here for the next 3 or 4 years. And I like what you said, too, about safety, because what I like in some of these free agents is if you sign them for a specific role and that role doesn't work out, is there a backup plan? And with Byron Jones, I would say yes. I could very easily see him toward the back end of his career as he gets on the wrong side of 30. I could see him playing free safety, potentially teamed with Eric Rowe at that point. So, yeah, I've got Byron Jones there at 6.
And one other thing I want to add there, too, that I love about the idea of signing Jones is if you sign Jones with the fact that Miami's picking 5th in the draft here, it doesn't turn you away from drafting a Jeff Okudah because you still have a role for Byron in this defense. If you draft Okudah, who by all accounts and by all research I've done thus far could be a generational talent at corner to pair opposite Xavier Howard, then suddenly you've got Byron Jones at safety in the mix with Eric Rowe, Adrian Colbert, or possibly even somebody else that you could pick up in free agency, because there are some safeties available in free agency too that could enter the mix and be an upgrade. But for me, at number 5, I've got Matt Judon, the outside linebacker from Baltimore. This guy's got 9.5 sacks, 54 tackles. He may end up getting franchised by the Ravens. Fans are pounding the table to sign him to an extension now, and there's a reason for that. He's a young, ascending player that had 9.5 sacks rushing the passer and managed to add the 54 tackles, can play the run, and absolute nightmare matchup for opposing offenses. Matt Judon would be a hell of an upgrade over a Taco Charlton, over a Charles Harris, you name it. And Miami's got the cap space to make the move to get him.
Yeah, and Judon made his first Pro Bowl this past year. He's somebody, I'll tell you, I didn't have on my list, but was very close. He was in my honorable mentions, and he may be a better fit than some of these other pass rushers you see on the market, because he's somebody he dropped over in pass coverage over 100 times. He's a bigger guy, 6'3.5", 260 pounds. So he's not that just pin your ears back and get to the quarterback type that some of these other guys in free agency are. So he'll be interesting to see if he shakes loose. My one concern with Judon is that some of these outside linebackers who have left the Baltimore Ravens have always have a lot of them, like Terrell Suggs, like Pernell McPhee, a couple other guys, haven't had quite the same success elsewhere. And if Judon were 25 or 26 instead of going to be 28, then I'd probably think a little bit different too. Anyway, number 5 on my list is somebody you've mentioned. It's Joe Tunney, and he's an interesting guy because back in our draft coverage a few years ago, we talked about him a lot. C.K. Parrott absolutely loved him and wanted him as a second-rounder. Patriots ended up taking him in the 3rd round, and he's turned out to be one of the best in the league. The only player in NFL history to start on 3 straight teams that went to the Super Bowl in his first 3 years in the league. And over the last 3 years, last 4 years now, because this playoff hasn't happened yet, but in his 4 years in New England, he has missed only 21 snaps out of a possible 5,240. So very, very durable. He's 6'5", 308, smart player. I don't think he's quite the talent that Brandon Scherff is, but still a very, very solid player. The question is going to come down to, do you want to pay somebody like this $9 or $10 million a year, or do you think you can get a similar type of player there in the draft?
Yeah, I think you may be able to get a similar-ish player, but again, the draft is still a crapshoot. You don't know for certain, no matter how much research you do, if a lot of these guys are going to translate to the NFL. I don't want to use the first-round resource on a guard to be sure. And you know what Joe Tunney is. You know what he's going to come in and do. And this offensive line has been an Achilles heel for this team. You get a reliable offensive line, and suddenly even if you're down to Josh Rosen could be a good player behind a good offensive line. And adding a Joe Tunney would definitely help with that. But I'm going to stick to the defensive side of the ball here. And Justin Simmons, the safety from Denver, has had a standout year. It has elevated his level of play going into his free agency. He's got 65 tackles, 4 interceptions, 15 passes defense, and just has played amazing football this year. And if you end up with Jeff Okudah, Byron Jones, Justin Simmons, Bobby McCain, Eric Rowe, and Xavier Howard in that secondary, you're in a great place. Or if, God forbid, the unthinkable happens from Xavier Howard's issues, you still have Jeff Okudah and Byron Jones on the perimeter. You've got Bobby McCain, Eric Rowe, and Justin Simmons now manning the safety spot. So really I think he could be even more of a standout with more talent around him in Miami's secondary if it comes down to that.
Man, oh man, you're making my job pretty easy here today, Paul, because number 4 on my list also is Justin Simmons. And what I like about him, in addition to the talent level, I mean, this is somebody that, again, we only reference PFF on the show if it jumps out. He has a grade of over 90 at free safety, one of their top-rated players. I do think he'll be a big priority for the Broncos to re-sign, but he's not going to be cheap either. I mean, could see this guy getting over $10 million a year. Free safety is very important in this Patriots-style defense. You see what Devin McCourty did in New England. I mean, this is a potential Hall of Fame type player in New England. He'll also be a free agent, but he's on the wrong side of 30. But if you've signed Justin Simmons at free safety, and you've got Eric Rhodes, strong safety, you've got Xavier Howard at corner, and now you can move Bobby McCain back to the fifth cornerback spot, and you've also got Nick Needham and Jamal Wiltz on the team. It would be important to still find that boundary cornerback, but I feel pretty confident Brian Flores would be able to do that. Paul, number 3 for you.
Let's get back to some fat guys here, and I'm still going to stay on the defensive side of the ball. And I know it's a guy that you love, and I'm pretty sure it's probably going to show up on your list as we continue to move up. But Chris Jones, the defensive end from Kansas City, 9 sacks, 36 tackles. He's a 300-plus pounder. You know, you can play him at 3-4 defensive end. He can be a little more of that run stuffer that can still rush the pass. He's very young, and I love him as a Flores fit. I mean, you look what they did with Sealer a couple of weeks ago. And you get a way more talented player in Chris Jones, and he can just dominate in this Flores defense. So Chris Jones with an exclamation point. I think he's one of the guys that Miami really needs to go after hard this year.
Number 3 for me is going to be somebody you mentioned, Yannick Ngakoue. He is 24 years old now. He won't be in fact, he'll be 24 when free agency starts in March. I think his birthday's at the end of March. So incredible numbers for this point in his career. I mean, over 3,000 snaps, 37.5 sacks, 15 forced fumbles, and somebody that he's been more of a pass rusher at this point in his career, which may go a little bit against what Flores is looking for out of an impact player on the front seven. But when he has dropped back in coverage, I've seen some film. I think he's done a pretty good job, or he's at least shown the ability to do it. And that's a big important point here with the Dolphins pass rush. They did not get a lot of sacks on the year. They did not put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And if you don't come out of free agency in the draft with all these resources, without that pass rusher, you that better not be an excuse here at the end of the 2020 season, because you had more than enough resources in the draft and in free agency for that. So I think they do have to come away with one guy, maybe even 2. Yannick Ngakoue is going to be paid very handsomely here in this offseason.
He really is. And sliding up to number 2 on my list, I got a guy we've beat the table for over and over throughout the regular season. This should come as no surprise to anybody out there. But Jack Conklin, right tackle from the Titans. Again, I think he's a guy that slips free here. He could finally give us that bookend piece that a healthy Juwan James should have before getting let walk. And Jack Conklin, he's on the right side of 30. He's still an ascending player. He's a very, very good right tackle. And Miami needs to solidify the tackle position. I know there's a lot of good tackles in this draft, but again, I haven't hit a left tackle yet on my list. So if you go into the draft with a want to upgrade center and a need to upgrade the left tackle position, this is a draft that's very thick at the left tackle position. So that's, believe it or not, a little bit easier to fill this year than it should be in most. But you've got to solidify the rest of that line, so you're not having to spend, half your 14 resources trying to rebuild this offensive line and hoping and praying you don't whiff.
Number 2 on my list is Jack Conklin. This is somebody that I think we're higher on than a lot of other people are, and I don't quite. Look, I kind of get it as to why. We've always prioritized right tackle, I think, a lot more than our listeners and other people have. My big thing with him is I think there are a lot of misconceptions about him. I think when I mention him as one of the free agents I really want, I get kind of bashed on Twitter about it. I mean, when I say Chris Jones or Justin Simmons or Brandon Scherff, everyone's in agreement. Everybody likes it. When I say Conklin, it's no. And the reasons that they tend to give is he's injury prone, he's not a great athlete, and he's a player. This is the big one that the Titans did not extend a fifth-year offer to. But there's a very specific reason for that. He's had kind of an interesting career. He was drafted in 2016. They drafted him over Laramie Tunsil when he was falling in that draft, 8th overall. He was an all-pro as a rookie. And then in his second year in 2017, he had another great year. But at the end of that year, in the playoffs, in the second round of the playoffs, he tears his ACL. So not only does that put him out of the playoffs, but in 2018, it puts him out for what we thought would be half the season. He missed 3 games. They forced him in early. He played terribly. He got a concussion. So a terrible nightmare 2018 season for Jack Conklin for good reason. Then they don't extend the fifth-year offer to him. Because they've got Taylor Lewan at left tackle, who's been a Pro Bowler, and Dennis Kelly at right tackle has been an underrated player for them too. So they didn't extend that offer where it would have been about $14 million a year. So because of that, he's expected to hit free agency, and I think he is a fantastic player, and I think he's rounding back into that 2016 form that he showed when he was a rookie. Another thing too, I love these, just like with Justin Simmons, I love these signings where you get definitely better at 2 positions. I don't want to see Jesse Davis out there at right tackle next year. I know he played a little better than we thought, but I think he's a much better fit as a guard. You sign Conklin, you move Jesse Davis to right guard. I think you've got the right side of your line taken care of here for the next several years, and you can focus a little more exclusively on left tackle, left guard, and center. So he's going to be paid handsomely. One other thing about him too is that I think is a misconception too is that he's not very good in pass protection. That is bullshit. He's let up 4 sacks this year. 3 of them were in one game to Josh Allen, who had double-digit sacks as a rookie, and 2 of those 3 sacks were when Mariota was at quarterback. You watch those plays. Mariota takes the snap and basically runs right into Josh Allen. Conklin really couldn't do anything about that. So he's somebody that we've certainly banged the table on here for. Paul, finally, I suspect by process of elimination I know who is number 1 on your list, but I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's a big secret to anybody on our listener base, et cetera. And I think the only secret and surprise for you is the fact that I've got him tabbed at left guard in Brandon Scherff. Brandon Scherff came up with the Hawkeyes playing left guard. He slid into left tackle as a sophomore when Riley Reif went down. And really, I know the Redskins flipped him to right guard. The Redskins are not known for making the best decisions over the course of my 40 years on Earth. So I'd love to see him slide back to that left guard position, and I think it slots Jesse Davis where he needs to be as that swing guard, swing tackle backup. That suddenly Miami's got a very, very good backup in Jesse Davis as opposed to a very, very meh starter in Jesse Davis. But suddenly you've got an offensive line going into the draft that's Jack Conklin at right tackle, Joe Tunney at right guard. Yes, we still have Kilgore at center, but you may be able to look at Michael Dieter there. Brandon Scherff at left guard, and the question mark of the revolving door at left tackle. And that's a hell of a lot better offensive line. I think Dan Kilgore suddenly turns into a hell of a lot better player stuffed in between Joe Tunney and Brandon Scherff going into next season. And I don't care who your running back is. If you can't run the ball with those 3 additions to the offensive line, you don't belong in the NFL, period. And yes, I definitely think Miami still needs to upgrade at the running back position in this scenario.
So when you mentioned Joe Tunney at right guard, when you said him early in your list, I was confused. And now that you just explained that, I'm a little more confused because I'm not quite understanding if you sign Tunney and you sign Scherff. Scherff has only played right guard with the Redskins, and
Yep.
Tunney has only played left guard with the Patriots in his career. Why would you flip him?
Mainly because of Scherff, for me. It's Scherff's the bigger priority. Scherff's the better guard. And I think as good as Scherff has played at right guard for the Redskins, he was even better playing at the left guard position in college. And I'm not one of these people that at the guard position a lot of times buys into like, oh, this guy at that one, he can only play that one. To me, I think Tunney can slot into right guard just fine, and Brandon Scherff is the better talent, and I think he's better at left guard than he is at right guard. Am I upset with a flip flop in the other direction? Not a bit, not a bit at all. But watching tape on Scherff, I loved him at Iowa at left guard. I love the fact that he can kick out to left tackle in a pinch, even though I'd love to keep him interior. I want to see him on that left side of the line. I want to see a left side of the line that's impenetrable, and that starts with the middle of that left side. And I think Brandon Scherff just cannot be moved. If you bull rush, you can't move him. You cannot move him for 90% of these defensive tackles in the league. And to me, protecting the blind side for most of these quarterbacks is huge, and they still need to upgrade that left tackle position as well coming out of my list. But I like Scherff better over there. So for me, $9 or $10 million, I'm pretty sure you can probably convince Tunney to play right guard. And I'm not upset with a flip-flop of the two, but I just like the idea better.
Yeah, I can see your point there on Scherff maybe being left guard, and that frees Jesse Davis up to move kick inside to right guard. That would make some sense. If you signed both of them for $10 to $15 million a year and immediately switched them positions, then I'd be a little bit confused. But that's a subject
you
for
can
another
be confused.
day.
You'll see it. You'll see it if it happens. And
yeah, I guess I don't think it'll happen. That's my point. But okay. But the bigger part, that's splitting hairs here. The bigger thing is you've got three offensive linemen that we really hope hit the market, and that we've identified them several times for several months: Jack Conklin, Joe Tunney, and Brandon Scherff. I'll say this: if you end up signing all three of those guys, I am fine with you sitting out the rest of free agency other than picking up a few guys, because that will mean that you're spending really your entire draft on the defensive side of the ball and at quarterback, which I would be perfectly fine with.
And left tackle.
Yeah, and tackle. Yeah, you'd need a left tackle too. That's correct. I'd be surprised if they came away with all three of them. I'd be surprised if they came away with two of them. But you've certainly got to get one of them. And we're not sure if all three of them are even going to hit the market. But out of those three guys, you absolutely have to nail one, because otherwise, Paul, you may get stuck in a position where you get to the draft and you're picking 3-4 times in the top 39 picks, and you may be pushed into a corner where you have to draft two offensive linemen.
You really might, and I don't want to be stuck. Miami's probably going to have to take a few offensive linemen no matter what. A couple developmental guys, a left tackle, take a swing at anybody that can play center that you think can be reliable there. I mean, and that's even with the addition of these three if you're able to get them. So I know Miami's got 14 draft picks. There's a lot I want to see Miami do with those, and doing some mock drafts already. It's if you do a lot to fix the offensive line in free agency, these mock drafts get a whole lot sexier at the end, because you're not trying to dump early day one, day two resources into fixing this offensive line. And, if you're going to get a rookie quarterback, you need to upgrade this offensive line. You don't want to see a guy get knocked gun shy because he doesn't have anybody to protect him. If you're going to go with Josh Rosen, which is a possibility as much as fans may not love it, if you're going to go with Josh Rosen, we've never seen Josh Rosen play behind an offensive line that doesn't have him decked every single play. And so, you look back at college, he did a hell of a lot better there with a little bit of protection. So he might be a guy that in this spread offense, if he gets some protections, able to do some fun things. And he's got the talent. So really, you have to upgrade this offensive line. If you don't, it doesn't matter what you do at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And the Dolphins also would have an option too. Say they did sign, let's say, Joe Tunney and Jack Conklin. I still think that would be optimistic, simply because there's so many teams in the league and there's so much money thrown around, and these guys could end up getting re-signed anyway. If you did that, then you can have the option of saying, okay, we're going to go in the draft, we're going to draft a left tackle in the first round, and we're going to draft a center like Creed Humphrey at the end of the first round too. Now you can say we have a dominant potentially offensive line, and that's a great thing. So yeah, there are a lot of options. It'll be interesting to see where they spread those resources out, but it puts added pressure on this team right now with this spread offense and with using a lot of heavy wide receiver formations to get the pass protection right. Because if you go into next season using 4 and 5 wide receivers as often as they probably will, I don't care who plays quarterback for you, whether it's Fitzpatrick or whether it's Rosen, whether it's somebody still in college right now, that guy's got to get killed.
He is, and that actually leads me into my honorable mentions here, because one of the first guys on my honorable mentions that didn't make my top 10 list but was close was probably my only 30-plus guy on the list. But Anthony Costanzo, if he hits free agency, can come in and be that stopgap at left tackle that lets you either draft a developmental guy at left tackle that you think can be dominant in a few years, lets you hold off till the following offseason when maybe you can convince Laramie Tunsil to come back if he doesn't get franchised. Maybe you can go ahead and get that left tackle in the following draft with one of those early picks that you've got. I mean, it lets you delay decisions on that left tackle position if you were able to get a Costanzo. He just didn't make my list here. And then just a couple other guys I want to really quickly touch on, 2 that are consolation prizes. Kyle Fackrell of the Packers. He's a guy that I know Miami looked at previously and weren't able to bring into the building. I think he's a guy that could come in and help out if you whiff on all the other DENs and linebackers on my list. Another one, if you whiff on Justin Simmons, maybe Von Bell of the Saints. And believe it or not, and I only added this guy to my list after the Changeli signing because I think he's got the skill set to play very well in the Changeli offense, especially given his development over this past year. I don't think it happens. I'm prefacing it with that. But the one guy that could potentially be an upgrade over Ryan Fitzpatrick in a Changeli offense would probably be Ryan Tannehill. And as goofy as that sounds, he's having a resurgent year with the Titans right now. He's mobile in the pocket. He's able to run and take off with the ball, which is absolutely a staple of this spread offense. And he's protecting the football and playing absolutely lights out right now as far as it goes in the NFL. So stranger things have happened. I don't see it happening, but I wouldn't be opposed to the idea like I would have been a year ago when they first parted ways with Tannehill. And it's like, you know what, if you're going to do that, you don't bring him back. But stranger things have happened. I wouldn't hate the idea.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you this. If they spend $7 million to trade Ryan Tannehill for a 4th-round pick, and he somehow hits free agency, and they sign him for $30 million a year, I'm done. I'm finished. That's a level of stupidity I don't think I'll be able to understand. But I will say this. As a fit, yeah, he is a good fit, but I'm glad you said that you don't think it's going to happen on there too, because good for Ryan Tannehill, but that would I think would make the Dolphins the biggest joke in the NFL if they were to do that. So I'm glad you said that you don't actually think it's going to happen. But how about another player though, Paul? Oh, and by the way, before I rambled on for so long. Chris Jones is my number 1 guy, and we talked about that throughout the episode.
Yeah.
So no, that's my fault. That's not your fault. I rambled on about so many other players. Another guy too that's going to hit the market. I'll put you on the spot here a little bit. Is Melvin Gordon, and he's not on our list. I'll get to my honorable mentions here in a minute. But he's somebody that's going to hit free agency this year. He held out this year. The Dolphins are going to be looking for a running back, obviously. He's probably not going to get the $10 million he wanted last year when he held out, but maybe around $8 million could possibly happen. What do you think? Is that somebody that you'd consider?
Consider yes. Would I love the idea? No. I think he'd play well for us, but again, it's Derrick Henry is so lights out right now that's the only reason he made my list. Gordon would be a fallback for me at best. And there are so many prospects I love in the draft this year. I want to spend 2 resources at the position in the draft, and I'd rather do that than spend $8 million on Melvin Gordon. But again, he'd do well in this offense. Yeah,
he's somebody I think would be. This is the way I go back and forth on that a little bit. Is number one, this is an organization that, like we said with Ryan Tannehill, spent $5 million to get a 4th-round pick for Tannehill. It's pretty much what they did. They spent another $4.5 million in the Aqib Talib trade to basically buy a 5th-round pick, and they spent a little over $1 million to eat up some of Robert Quinn's salary to get a 6th-round pick. So it would make sense to get a good player in Gordon at running back, and then you're not spending what we would think is probably a 2nd or 3rd rounder on a running back, and probably going out and signing like a Jordan Howard for $4 or $5 million a year too. So from a value perspective, there that makes a little bit more sense. But I also get back to as well, this is a guy that's averaged under 4 yards a carry 4 of his 5 years in the NFL. He's got a lot of hits. It's a young man's position, and he'll be 28 years old here in the upcoming year. So that's one thing I look at. But just wanted to pick your brain on that. A couple other honorable mentions for me as we look here is 2 offensive linemen drafted in 2015, left tackle DJ Humphries and Lions guard Graham Glasgow. Could be somebody that you get kind of on that second tier. DJ Humphries has been hurt a lot as a pro, but had his best year, actually put together 16 games. If they feel they're in Arizona that you can spread things out a little bit more and it takes some pressure off left tackle, you could see him going. Graham Glasgow is just a very solid center guard, massive at 6'7", 320, can play center and guard, so gives you some options there too. Also, former Patriots cornerback and current Titans cornerback Logan Ryan is 29, but had 4 sacks, 4 interceptions, made a lot of big plays this year for the Titans, can fit in the slot, play on the boundary, maybe even play some free safety a little bit later in his career too. So we're going to have a lot more breakdowns here as far as the NFL draft and a couple sleeper free agents that we've got here. We'll be sure to pile some shows together on that. We'd love to hear your opinion on our social media outlets too. I am Brian Catt. Paul is I'm Brian Catt NFL on Twitter. Paul is fanatic_pick. You can follow us on the FinSide on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Check out our merch store on the FinSide.threadless.com. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it's on the FinSide. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide. Inside. It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what